Alrighty folks, want to welcome you back to the next video from Gates Computers Tips and Reviews. For this one I'm going to continue along on my servers. The server edition. So this one I wanted to kind of single back in on the inside of this server. You will notice quite a bit of differences on the inside of the server compared to a home computer. Well, does that really make a difference? Does that really help you much? Depending on what you're going to do. Like, a lot of servers I see, there are little chassis bolt type covers that go in here that will hold your bigger cards so they don't flop around. Might be handy, might be kind of nice in a newer situation with these giant video cards that are out there that cost as much as a server. That maybe if you're doing some kind of video graphics and you need to put in two 3090s or the new 40 cards or whatever they're going to be coming out here pretty soon. Maybe having a little clip device that, because I'm sure you've seen videos, I'm sure you've dealt with them if you're using those cards. They're pretty heavy and pretty bulky and pretty large and hanging on that little tiny slot, anchoring just to the back of your case. Some people put little things in there to hold them, and you know if they come with a nice kit that has something like that, might be something to look at. Usually with servers, you have a cooling direct path. That's kind of different between little computers where you have just a fan blowing in air and maybe your CPU or something in there with the fan and your power supply fan. Some have fans in front and back just to circulate through. Some servers will have fans, big fans in the front, fans in the back, and your central fans for your CPU. There's some of them, kind of like this one, that you have this giant fan here that draws air in across your CPU and kind of just blows out the back. That's kind of a difference between server and workstation boards that really I see a lot of, is how this cooling is done. CPU wise, I would not say there's a difference, because you can put a server board Xeon in a standard workstation kind of computer. You can shop online and find workstation computers with Xeon processors. Difference is it might have to do with what kind of Xeon you want to put in there. There's different platforms of Xeons. That might be one difference with server board. But again, if you're putting that kind of server board in a workstation computer, well, it should support it. Power supplies. Brought up single, double, redundancy, all these different things that you can do inside the server. Where it's positioned, how it's at. Gaming PC types, styles. Nowadays, this is an older unit. Newer ones, most of them, the power supplies are down below, so you can have cooling up top. So if you want to do water cooling and that type of stuff, you can put your rad and all that stuff up top. So there are some changes that have happened in the layout. Brought up lifespan changes, why you would want to change your computer. The key reasons, like every 5 to 6 years on a server, I believe is the baseline, is what they recommend. Of course, probably most people go over that, and a lot of people probably push it further than that. But here's one of the key factors is the new ones, the power supplies are down below. So you can put all the cooling up top. So there's little changes that have happened over the years that might be worth you buying the new server anyways. Now I see where they have hard drives, like the power supplies here, there's a drive here and a drive here, and they're split. That's kind of interesting. I see that on some of the newer chassis. So there's different things that you might be interested in doing, and you find out and you shop around and you find what you want. But these were some of the key factors that I found with servers. And I believe this one has a fan down here on the bottom too that blows air in, and then it circulates the air. So depending on your server, how it's done, how it's configured, this is really the inside of the server. Now again, depending on the server and how things are, and how many bays and other things, I find a lot of times servers will have more SATA ports. I'm seeing now they have, of course, M.2 ports in boards. So this is a variable that you want to look at. I brought it up in the last video that, like these drives, the old mechanical drives, you use these for your data, your shared files, your documents. So something like this has 2 bays in it. Depending on if you want to clone them, RAID them, stripe them, whatever you want to do, you might have an issue. Not to mention you can buy mounts to mount drives up here. You have bays up here. So you can put a solid state in. Maybe you go, you know what? I don't want a lot of data, but I want fast. So I want a 2 terabyte SATA drive and not a 2.2 terabyte spinning mechanical drive. Guess what? You can do that. You can put in 1 terabyte 512 256 in one bay, put your OS, put your programs on it, put all you need on there, put in another 2 terabyte drive. Or because it's SATA, they're smaller, you buy another cable, split your power, put 2 drives in here with the dual mount. As long as you have the clearance and you can get it in. This one looks like there's clearance, you can get that drive in there. Now you end up with 2 terabyte drives where you can clone and stripe. Maybe you put a dual mount, put your 256, 2 terabyte, 2 terabyte, 2 terabyte, stripe them all 3, and have one as your OS. So I wanted to touch base on this factor compared to that factor on those drives. Knowing what you're going to put in your system, well, that made this system look a lot different, didn't it? You can only put 2 drives in? Oh wait, you can put 4 drives in there, in these bays. You don't have to fool around with any of this over here. It has the ports. You can add on. So that's what I really wanted to touch base on, is the inside of the computers. Knowing what's on the board, the CPU, the heat sink, knowing this layout, knowing, of course, when you get into some of this, and if you want to run one of those new giant video cards, knowing where these parts are, because these are big parts. These aren't little parts that are in some of these computers. These are some big components that are in here. And you try to jam a 3090 in here, knowing where that port is, that takes up, 2 slots, you might run into a spacing problem. So these are some of the things I wanted to go through, especially if you build your own server. You don't have to pre-buy it. You can build it like I mentioned on the other one. These are some of those little things that I don't really hear a lot of people talk about. So I wanted to go through this and actually show what to look at when you get into the server. Floppy cable. Hey, floppy cable. Nobody needs that anymore. But wanted to go through and show some of this. So, of course, you can put a floppy in a server. You can do whatever you want in a server. Of course, you got to make sure you have the ports, make sure you have the power, make sure you have everything you need. These are the old style. So that's one of the other things that you can look at. Maybe you really want to cut costs, but don't recommend it because it'd be running older hardware is IED. Buy the little conversions, change them back to IED kind of cabling. But I don't recommend that. It's older hardware. This is your server, so protect it. So I think that's pretty much all I can really cover on the inside of this server that I think is a valid, important factor. Not to mention, look at, does it have ports for adding USB interface? For some reason, when I ordered this one used, the USB interface on the front is unplugged. Maybe they didn't want anybody plugging USB cards into that server to transfer data off, so they unplugged it from the board. So these are things that you can look at. Now, of course, this is like USB 1 or 2, I think. If you're looking at, you know, USB 3, C, the plugs are different. You want to look at, make sure the board supports it. So these are those little factors that you want to know of when you buy or build a server. These are those little things inside the server that make a difference. Of course, you have your bays if you want your CD-ROMs. Mention the external. Mention the smaller drives. A lot of computers are coming with the new smaller drives instead of the big drives. So, some little points that you might want to look at. Of course, power supply, power plug, pin. Went through power supply stuff on my power supply video about voltages. Making sure this one is a 80 plus power supply. I don't know if it gave me a color rating. But of course, you know, you want gold, silver, platinum, titanium. You know, they have the new color ratings that for the better parts in the power supply. So those are some of the little issues with servers that you might want to be more interested in looking at than a workstation. Because if you have one power supply like this one, you might want to make sure you have a really nice one that you can kind of trust that isn't going to go out. Because if your whole business with 4 or 5 employees, 8 employees are running off of this and this goes down, you're out of business. You're down. If you have no standalone operations or standalone business functions and it's all run through your server, well, you want to make sure you keep your best parts. Of course, if you're using this at home for your data backups, your photos, your videos, of course, you want to make sure you have the best because you don't want to lose that information. You don't want to lose access to that information. So I wanted to go through and show this because this becomes a bigger point now that I don't hear anybody talk about this. You hear about it on gaming machines. If you want a new video card in there, they would recommend a 1,000 watt power supply, 800 to 1,000 watt. They're just saying 1,000 watt. You might want to consider something like that based on what you're doing. The other computer I mentioned, I believe in the other video, was a 450. This one, I believe, is a lot smaller. It was, I thought about 300, but I'm not too sure. So that's one of the little factors I wanted to bring up and point out again. Now, this one's an actual server. This one is only a dual core. It's not a Xeon and all those type of things. I believe the other one I had was basically, it's a Pentium processor, but it has a bigger power supply. It was a custom built. This is a retail system you buy off the shelf. So you have those variables that I wanted to bring up again, that you don't necessarily have to buy all of this pre-built. You can buy this, have the CPU and all this stuff, and maybe you don't like the motherboard or you don't like the case. And if you have all these components and you have a case that all this will fit in, you can take all that out, put it in a different case, and use it. Back plates, depending on the server now. I want to specify that because this one does not have a separate back plate. The back is cut for that motherboard. So a lot of the computers you get have a metal back plate that fits in there. It's just a giant hole in the back that the motherboard goes into. So depending on if you're going to build your own and do that type of stuff, you can. Maybe you really love this case and it doesn't have that, but you want to change everything out inside, but you want to keep this case. You can mod the case by cutting the case, cutting all that out, making the opening for the plate to fit. There's variables out there. There's people modding cases and doing a lot of crazy stuff, putting all kinds of weird stuff out there on the videos that you can go out and find. So I wanted to touch base on some of this because maybe you just like the look of it. You like the look of the front. You like how it's done. Maybe there's a special decal. Maybe it's colored. You'll see videos where people have special faceplates made. Maybe you have a special faceplate made for that kind of server with your business name or whatever you want. Maybe it has the department and all that type of stuff. You know, maybe you have something nice and fancy on there that you had custom made and you don't want to change that. Well, you change the insides out. Keep the case as long as it's the same board, platform, design, all that type of stuff that it fits. If you're building computers, you understand that. So I wanted to touch base on that because you hear a lot about modding cases and modding this and modding that, but nobody actually, unless you go and look it all up to see what someone did, how they modded it, how they fit this new mini computer and this other kind of thing, but where's the real world of it? Where's what everybody else really will need? I mean, I don't need a computer that fits in a Tonka truck. What? I mean, yeah, it'd be nice to have something like that. It'd be kind of cool. But in a business environment, unless you're renting heavy equipment, I'm not too sure why you would really need that. So I'm trying to stick with the basics, to the real information that really people need to know that I don't hear people saying. So I know I've stuck with this a lot, but I want everybody to see this. I want everybody to be able to go back and review this. Of course, this has changed over the years. There'll be more modifications to this layout, what people are doing, but for an old server, this has capabilities to do what we need it to. It's just maybe nobody's pointed it out or nobody's actually thought about it because it's an older server. But if it's depending on what features and what other type of things, it can work. This is probably going to be my data backup solution for my videos and those type of things when I'm done. So that I can turn it on, I can back up, turn it off, leave it alone. I know a lot of YouTube people talk about backups. They have NASes and they have cloud backup with a redundant backup. To me, I thought, well, that's kind of crazy because I don't think my videos are worth that much. Once I post them, they're up there. I can't see myself doing too much more with the video after I've already posted it. But maybe that'll come up in the future. Maybe I need to repost these on a different site or a different way for people to get the information. Maybe I can hang on to them. Well, I don't need a NAS that's running 24/7. I can use a standard computer. Now I have 4 terabytes of hard drive. I can put it in that other computer I have that has a solid state with 4 terabyte. I can boot it up, see if it'll clone, stripe, do whatever I need to. I don't need to clone or stripe these. I can do a 2 terabyte and a 2 terabyte backup with 2 different drives. I can do videos on one, I can do all my little screenshots and other photos and other stuff on another one and keep them separate. On 2 different drives. I don't have to do 2 different folders. So these are some of these little scenarios I wanted to go through to point out the inside of the servers. Configurations. I'll get into all of that. I'll probably do a couple of screen captures and go through and show you, you can do this, you can do that, you can do this, you can do that, you can do this, this is how you do that. So people are aware, because it gets to a point like, I'm going to reference this again, network cables. I have so many videos on network cables. It's just a server. Just a network cable. So let me wrap this one up. Hopefully everybody who sees these videos will go watch my network cables, because a lot of those aren't getting seen. We'll go see all my captures. We'll go see the BIOS capture. We'll come back and see this BIOS capture when it's released. We'll come back and see all of these things that are on there. Again, all these videos are related to each other. Computers are really easy, but they're really complicated. Because it's really easy to do, but to know all the information you need to know, it's complicated. Now, I'm not going to tell you, putting this in, labeling this as D, labeling this as E, is wrong. Striping these and labeling them both D and having 4 terabytes instead of 2 and 2 is wrong. No. It basically does the same thing, except for what striping will do is better your performance, because it might not all write to one drive, it might write to both drives that help performance. But that's when you get into RAID configurations. That's the difference between rating and non-rating. Now, if you're just doing a backup, you might not need that. I'm sure you don't. And if you want to do separate drives and you don't want to stripe and all of those type of things, maybe you don't want to go mechanical. Maybe you want to go solid states like I brought up. That'll be plenty fast enough that you don't need to stripe it. Mirroring is different. That's a backup situation where you have redundancy. You have 2 copies. So you have those factors that come into involved when you install on a server. I know I keep going on, but I kind of feel these are important to bring up. Hopefully I haven't lost anybody by this time. I think I will wrap this one up, because the next is all internal programming and all of that type of stuff. I've covered your external, internal differences between the servers. Those 3 videos will be posted, and then I'll get into the good stuff in the inside. The more details of what I went over. Alrighty, thank you for watching. Make sure you hit the bell, subscribe. Thank you.